we have these old family photos. I had talked before on the air. In fact, it was one of the times I think our next guest, Michelle, was with us, about my great-grandmother who emigrated to New Kensington from Poland. She came with her husband and their 5 children. And when she arrived, somewhere within the first 2 years, he took off and left. And she was there by herself, didn't speak the language, had all these little kids, and had to figure out how to survive.
Yikes.
So she lived a long time. And so we have good photographs of her with my dad and my uncle. And so it seems like there's not all that much time between when she passed away and when I came along. But her legend has just lived on because she was able to support her 5 kids by making moonshine and running a bar. And probably accumulating a lot of secrets of people who frequented those places throughout those decades. But so I have pictures of the bar. We have pictures of the kitchen of the bar. We have, so looking back at those, that does seem like it. I never knew her, but it's somehow, in a way that I don't really get, it means something to me.
A lot, because, of course, you love your dad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So he sat at her knee and learned whatever he learned at her. So that's cool. That's part of you.
Right.
I love it. Michelle Van Loon is with us. She's a regular guest on our show. Today, her brand new book drops called Translating Your Past, Finding Meaning in Family Ancestry, Genetic Clues and Generational Trauma. Michelle, welcome back to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. And wow, isn't that a long subtitle?
It is it is the longest subtitle I believe I've ever seen. But we're talking about history, Michelle, so it seems to make sense.
The publisher came up with it, and it has taken me a while to kind of get it in my head. I just don't have the same short-term memory that I once had. So the long-term memory, it took a while. I love that story about your very courageous and resourceful grandmother. Mm-hmm. Do you see kind of a through line between her story and your own experience?
Well, I gotta be honest. I had never thought about that until you mentioned that several months ago, Michelle, because it's such a good question. And I don't know if I can really assess it. All I know is that when I look at the pictures of her, I just found some new ones in some of the material that my dad left when he passed away. And she is terrifying looking. I mean, she doesn't smile in any pictures. She's not there to be, your best friend.
Right.
She looks like she's there to take prisoners.
But that just might have been the style of the day.
It might have been. Right? It might have been. But she had to be pretty tough to be able to navigate all that as a woman on her own.
In a bar, in a crowd of people, and it's illegal to drink, all that. That's a lot of moxie.
It is a lot. So, Michelle, I don't know. I guess I should ask you, how could someone I've never met impact me or tell me something about who I am?
Well, here is the thing about our culture, I think. A lot of us kind of imagine that we just come into this world and the past is an option for some of us, especially if what we know of our family history is full of losses, full of estrangements, full of separations and feuds and criminal activity or abuse. A lot of people are like, let's just leave that whole mess alone. And I am here to say that part of our testimony as believers includes all of that. It includes your grandmother. She's a part of kind of what made you who you are, even if you never knew her. I think the same thing. I have 3 out of 4 of my grandparents came to the United States at the turn of the last century from places, I don't know, you've probably never heard of, like Ukraine. Yeah. Places like that. What is now Poland, Belarus. That is where all my relatives came from during the pogroms of the beginning of the last century, when they were clearing out Jewish towns and cities, like in Fiddler on the Roof. And I kind of grew up knowing this, but I didn't really think about how this has shaped me as a human being, as a follower of Jesus. All of those things, that story is a part of what God chose to use to make me in his image for his glory right now, knowing that that was the ingredients that he was going to use. It's kind of mind-blowing if you think about it.
I think of the genealogies that are in Scripture, like the one at the beginning of Matthew, which shows us that there are a lot of surprising people who were in Jesus' background. For people who've never maybe read that portion of the Gospels, they might be surprised to know that. So, Michelle, kind of take us into that genealogy and tell us what that might, I don't know, what can we learn from that?
Well, and to situate those genealogies, which a lot of times people kind of
skip over
in their December Bible reading, they'll, you see at the beginning of Matthew and the beginning of Luke, you see these lists of names. And not all of them were sterling characters. Not all of them were of the people of Israel. There were outsiders. There were scoundrels. One of the scoundrels was named King David. Just for an example, all of those stories are not disconnected either from our own. And to be able to kind of think about what has God done that's made me me. A lot of us are resistant to going there, different from other cultures. There's other cultures in the world that if you meet somebody, they can tell you who their people are, and they can go back generations and generations. But here, whether it's because we're worried about touching, painful episodes of dysfunction, death has separated us. We aren't connected to our extended family in the same way, and sometimes even our family of origin. It's complex, and maybe we just don't feel like we have the energy to look at those stories, or it's confusing, or we're just too busy. We think we're too busy, but the past is speaking. And seeing all those genealogies that run through Scripture all the way through, the names that we're really tempted to zoom over, myself included, are there to let us know that God puts it all out there and wants us to be able to understand how we're connected. We don't necessarily have all the puzzle pieces, but it's a compelling story to fit your story into the larger story of your family, your church, and your community.
We're talking with Michelle Van Loon. Her brand new book drops today, Translating Your Past, Finding Meaning in Family Ancestry, Genetic Clues, and Generational Trauma. So, Michelle, I think it's probably fair to say that there are two camps of people. Those people who, love looking back and building a family tree, or wanting to do a DNA test to look at the deeper family tree. And those who, like you just described, it's too involved. It's too scary, maybe. I don't think I'm going to like what I find. It's best to just sort of leave those things. But whether you engage or not, there is something that's really important about your thread of your family, isn't it? I mean, you bring up the Gospels, of course. It's important. It's in the Bible, so it should be important in our own lives.
Absolutely. And, we are having to tap into our past every time we show up in a doctor's office and they ask for medical history. Right. We are dealing with families. Holidays can be loaded with either memory or sadness for people because, there's all of that kind of carries into our present. There's a lot of different ways that the past speaks in our lives. It's amazing, actually, to me when I think about the Bible's story. And for me, as I was beginning to explore these questions for myself, I was struck, and I've shared this in many places. If God was going to do a good PR job, if he went to public relations school now, all of the terrible stuff that's in the Bible would not be there. It would be spun into victorious, happily ever after kinds of stories. But he leaves all of that in there for us because we can see families that separate. We can see confusion. We can see wonderful heritage of faith that gets passed on despite, maybe a wayward father or a wayward great-grandfather. That God is in the redemption business, and it's true in the story of Scripture, and we're a part of that story. So
when I think about that story, Michelle, I think about
your Graham.
Yeah, I think about it's my great grandmother that we're talking about, and I don't know. So Ancestry.com, which has been such a big deal over the last 5 years, I have you haven't done that, John?
No.
Have you? I haven't done it either. Michelle, have you done it?
I did, and there were 0 surprises.
Really? Okay, I have to be honest. I didn't do it for 2 reasons. One is I was worried about the giving up information about myself to the general pool of human technology.
It's your DNA.
It's right. It just seems like that's as private as you can get.
Yeah.
And the other thing was I was kind of you hear these stories about people that find out things that are crazy town, and I was like, I don't know if I want to invite that into my life.
Right.
Well, I in the process of writing this book, I interviewed several people who had surprises. Ancestry DNA surprises, 23andMe surprises. And I talked to a woman just after I finished the book. I wish I could have included her story. Of finding out at age 70, she was almost 70, that her father wasn't her father. And, you have to kind of rearrange your life and your thinking. There's people that discover, siblings or half siblings that exist or other relatives, things that are that people a few generations ago would have been able to keep buried. But the truth is always our friend, even if it's hard, and even if it means kind of rearranging the way that you thought your life was. If it wasn't truthful, then it wasn't really reflecting kind of the full story of God.
Yeah.
So, but it is the privacy concerns, just in case you decided to, I don't know, create it or pull off a string of felonies.
Right.
That's where it gets dicey. And there are some realistic and wise concerns about how these consumer DNA companies are using those results. So it just really depends on balancing your sense of risk versus reward. But there's lots of other ways to be able to think about your family. It can be as powerful as just looking at those pictures and trying to pull together a narrative about them and to ask questions about how those people that you met and the people before them that you didn't met, how their choices shaped your experience, why you ended up there and not in Chicago or Pittsburgh or LA.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing, Kath has no taste for moonshine. I'll tell you that.
But if I commit a felony, John said he'll bail me out.
Right, I would. Yeah.
That's good.
Well, Michelle, it's a job well done. I mean,
it is, and it's exciting to talk to you on the day that the book drops.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da.
Very nice.
That's terrific. Michelle Van Loon, the newest book, which is available today wherever you buy your books, Translating Your Past, Finding Meaning in Family Ancestry, Genetic Clues, and Generational Trauma. Author Michelle Van Loon. Michelle, terrific to talk to you again, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
You guys be well.
Okay.
Stay away from the moonshine.